and you guys, are another set of eyes for the courts. So you're going to be talking to the kids, you're going to be talking to various people that we've talked to as well. So if something else comes across that is concerning to you, it's up to you guys to let us know. And same as if there's a service that you feel that can benefit a family that maybe we've missed because you guys have spent a lot more time with the family than we have, it is perfectly normal to bring that up to the worker and say, I've been working with Sally for a couple weeks now, and I really think that she's behind in school. Is there something else that can be done to help that out? And that's perfectly acceptable to be able to voice your opinions and your thoughts on a particular case. Any questions about that and your role working with us?
Either you have any tips on the best way to get a good rapport going with the social worker? Or
I guess it's just politeness and I think it's just how you approach it. I think is probably the best way to do it is just to call, identify who you are and hopefully the workers, most workers are trained and know who the CASA workers are, and you guys should have a working relationship, and that's the hope that we have between our CASA workers and the Fairfax County workers. We want to work together to serve our families better.
The court process is very chaotic, and a lot of stuff is going on, so the worker at that time probably won't have a lot of time to sit down with you and go over, the particulars of the case. You might have to kind of follow the worker around as they talk to various people, because a lot of work happens in the
cards and trying to track
right.
down who's who.
A lot of the work happens in the hallways. A lot of conversations happen in the hallways of courts. So what would be probably a good thing is make sure you get their contact information, and then probably after a couple days after court, call them up and schedule a time to sit down with them. That's convenient for both of you to go over more specific questions you have and to have access to the record if that's what you need.
Do the families see us as collaborators or competitors, or how do the families view the relationship between you all and the CASA?
I think positively, because I think you're an entity apart from Child Protective Services, and we are typically the bad guys. You are a neutral party coming in and you're not on a particular side. So I think that most of our families work good with their CASA workers. I haven't heard any.
They're going to want to share their stories with you. They're done talking to us. They're going to want to have another set of ears to hear their version of what's going on.
So your group sort of backs out prior to or at the point of the 5-day hearing?
We will be involved in the 5-day and the merits hearing, and at times the dispositional hearing. We have 3 hearings that we can attend. The 5-day and the merits, you'll have an intake worker on every one of those court hearings. Dispositional hearing is you'll see us occasionally. It depends.
Do you guys know the difference between the 3 hearings? Do you want me to explain? The 5-day hearing in short is when we file a petition, whether it's the protective order or a removal order, we have to have a hearing within 5 days of filing that petition. That is because a judge is signing off on an order that, based on just our version. They haven't heard the family side, they haven't heard anything. So the 5-day is to hear the department side and the family side of whether our actions for filing that petition is valid. If that is valid, then it gets set out for a merits hearing. The merits hearing is usually 30 days from that time. The merits hearing is an abuse neglect hearing. It's not to talk about transfer of custody. It's not to discuss relative placement. It's to discuss the findings and the facts of the case to make a court determination whether abuse and or neglect occurred. So that's why we are involved at that hearing. The dispositional hearing is the first time that custody transfer could occur by the courts. So that is also the first review hearing of if any services have been put in place, what progress has happened towards those goals of getting those services hooked up and getting those evaluations taken place. So that's the first hearing where either the ongoing worker takes over or the foster care worker takes over, and the beginning of where the intake worker steps out.
And that's 75 days out. So it's 5 days is your 5-day hearing. Your merits is 30 days out, and your dispositional is 75 days out.
And then you'll have review hearings, which you'll attend with the ongoing worker, the foster care worker.
Usually the children are not involved with any of these.
Well, it
They
depends.
can be.
We have kids that have to testify in court, which isn't an easy thing to do, but that does happen sometimes.
And if we're talking of ERO, it is 5 business days from when the child has been removed from the site?
Business days.
Correct, business.
Doesn't count weekends or holidays.
There are several factors that contribute to abuse and neglect situation. Some key ones are stress. Stress in families' lives is a key point. The type of child. If you have, a colicky baby, that can contribute to, stress levels, or a medically fragile child that needs a lot of attention, or an ADHD child. Financial, employment issues lead to abuse and neglect. Poverty, mental illness, substance abuse is a big one. Past history, lack of resources, lack of parenting skills can all contribute to abuse and neglect.
He has to multitask here because I can't help.
There's always usually a precipitating incident. Very rarely are we going to get called out and a parent is going to say, nothing happened, I just smacked my child, or I yanked on my child's arm causing a spinal fracture. Usually there was something that happened, some type of incident, some type of action that caused their action. Recognizing physical abuse, it's a questionable injury. Is it a pattern injury? Is the child's story not matching up with the type of injury? Like, I fell off my bike and it is a very linear, looped mark. The child's behavior towards the caretaker, is the child, fearful of the parent? Child's behavior at school. An interesting one that teachers have reported, they'll say that the child squirms when they sit down. So, could that be there's an injury on the bottom, or could be the child just doesn't want to sit in a chair? These are types of things that we can look into. It could be a child's negative behaviors at school, acting out more, being more disruptive than usual, those types of things. And also the explanation is not consistent, which I already touched on.
Sometimes we have no explanation, which is just as suspicious. I just have, we've gotten a slew of broken bones coming in of babies that are under the age of 6 months, and there's just no explanation. We've got femur fractures and arm fractures and, skull fractures, and somebody, either it's neglect or whether it's abuse, but there needs to be an explanation. And we'll get like a parent saying, my 3-month-old rolled off the bed, and that's how he got the skull fracture. What would be wrong with that?
There was no supervision.
Well,
Correct.
there you go.
Exactly.
A 3-month-old wouldn't be rolling over. So if somebody's telling us that a baby's rolling over at 3 months old, that's a red flag for us.
Or
So a lot of times we also have to look at the developmental phase of a child, and that will help us with trying to determine whether or not that story is consistent.
like the same thing with that 2-year-old that reached up and touched the stove. If that was a 6-month-old and mom said the 6-month-old reached up and touched the stove, probably that 6-month-old can't even stand. So that explanation wouldn't fit what happened, and then that raises a flag of what's going on. There are some characteristics of a caretaker regarding physical abuse. Most common is a lot of controlling or domineering parenting styles. Impulsivity, lack of judgment, unable to consider other people's needs, unrealistic expectations. That's a big one regarding schoolwork. My child needs to have straight A's, and if they don't have straight A's or they bring home a B on their report card, this is what the consequence is going to be, that type of thing. Inability to problem solve, poor social skills. These are just some types of a caretaker's characteristics for physical abuse. A child's indicator for neglect situations. Constant hunger, poor hygiene, inappropriate clothing, attended medical needs, parentified child. The case of the 10 kids of that dirty house, Jocelyn and I actually went to place the kids at a foster care agency, and we stopped and got them McDonald's and food so they could eat before the placement. And at the placement, they had little Tupperware containers of like chips and snacks and things like that. The kids, some of the kids would go over there and see if anyone was looking and taking stuff and putting in their pockets for later. Also, a very sad story about that case. The 7-year-old, 8-year-old, and 9-year-old were placed in a foster home together. Foster mom tells the kids, go down and get breakfast, fix yourself cereal for breakfast in the morning. Kids go downstairs, the foster mom's doing some other stuff, goes down there. What the kids did is they all poured the dry cereal in the bowl. The 9-year-old poured milk in the 7-year-old's bowl first. That child ate their cereal, poured their leftover milk in the 8-year-old's cereal. That child ate his cereal, poured in the 9-year-old's milk. So that's just a sign of a neglectful situation. And also a parentified child to know that a 9-year-old is going to take the steps to ensure that their younger siblings are taken care of before their own needs. Some indicators of emotional or mental abuse. Some speech disorders could be apparent. Some cognitive delays or development. Habit disorders such as that kid biting on his arm. Sleep disorders. It could be, incontinence or encopresis or enuresis, conduct disorders at school or in the community, or the non-organic failure to thrive, where there is some external cause that is linked to the situation. A caretaker's characteristics for mental abuse. We've touched on a lot of these. Will blame or belittle the child, withholds love or tells the child that they aren't loved, doesn't show affection. Treats siblings unequally. We've had cases where stepkids might get treated on not the same as biological kids, or adopted kids don't get treated the same as biological kids. Unrealistic expectations or demands. Lack of concern regarding child's issues. Child comes home saying, hey, I did this in school, and kind of gets brushed off, not really important. With CPS, we really try to use a strength-based approach. Our main goal, like Josh said earlier, is to not only get in the home and evaluate the circumstances around the event, but it's to work with families. It's to assess the crisis situation and to make changes in that family to prevent further abuse from happening. So we do that various ways. We do that with providing services through the community. We do that with providing education through ourselves and working with parents and educating them on parenting issues and topics. And we are always culturally sensitive to what is going on with their unique situation. Each family's different. Every family has their own dynamics, and we respect those situations. We want to create a family support system for them. A lot of families that we work with don't have strong familiar supports or strong community supports. So we try to hook them up with local resources, with organizations in the community to help build and strengthen their family unit in order to prevent further incidents of abuse and neglect to occur. We want to empower them. We don't want to enable them. Enabling is hand-holding. We can't hand-hold our families because we're not going to be there forever. We want to teach them the skills or provide them with the resources to be able to understand what their decisions are and how they're impacting the functioning of their kids, and to make them successful parents as well.
And we truly thank you guys for volunteering to be CASA workers and assisting us on these families and working with families in Fairfax County. It takes a lot of time and commitment from you guys, and we know that. And it's a lot of dedication from you guys, and we appreciate it. And we hope that your experience with the department will be positive, and that we will continue to work with you, and we will probably work together at some point. If I continue to stay, if I've been here this long, I'll probably be here longer. But we do thank you, and we know that this is a great asset to Fairfax County to be able to have CASA workers.
And one thing that someone touched upon on the break is coping or dealing with these types of issues. For us, a key thing for us to see this on a daily basis is to be able to separate it from your personal life. When those boundaries start blurring and you start waking up to seeing your kids in your caseloads and start thinking about them regularly, you need to work on being able to separate that. And one thing that we do in our unit is we rely on each other. We talk to each other frequently about cases. We talk to each other about our feelings centered around issues. We do regular case staffings of difficult issues. We use humor a lot. I mean, probably people would think that we're very sick because we joke around a lot about a lot of these cases. But it's just a way of us dealing with it and a way of coping with it. And you guys are probably going to come into contact with a lot of these and probably some worse situations than what we've shown you.
Far
You-
worse if they're going
You know, I mean, there's nothing worse than seeing a baby that's been shaken, or seeing, kids that are hoarding food because their parents failed to feed them. I mean, these types of things that you guys are going to come into contact with, and you're going to have to rely on each other and rely on your supervisors and rely on your family to be able to separate your volunteer work from your personal life.
I mean, I was talking to this lady here in the break about one thing that we've learned to do with these is we compartmentalize this abuse and neglect, and we have a separate place in our little heads to keep it away from our personal life. Because when it starts to take over and consumes you, that is when it gets too hard to do this kind of job. And dealing with this is not easy. But you have to find a balance, and you have to find a way to relieve that stress and also be able to be there for your families and these kids that you work with so dedicatedly.
And I think for me, and probably for all of you as well, I know that I'm giving these kids a voice that they normally would probably not have if it weren't for social workers, CASA workers, people in the community that care about these kids. So for me, I know that I'm doing good, that I'm able to help prevent, abuse and neglect, or help a child, or help a parent understand what they're doing is wrong and trying to correct a situation. Because without CASAs, without social workers, these kids would not have a voice. So I thank you guys for the work that you do.
I think we have a few minutes for
For
any
questions, I know we've gone over a lot of information very quickly.
This doesn't really relate directly to what you all talked about, but I'm sure you know this. For foster families, like if you remove children from their home, and do you always have a foster family for them to go to? And then if not, where do you put them?
We're fortunate in Fairfax County. Again, I keep saying that, but we are fortunate. We have an abundance of resources in this county available to us, and one of them is VEFC, which is Volunteer Emergency Families for Children. And we have a list of families in this area who volunteer to take our kids in the middle of the night at 2 in the morning when I've just taken custody, and we call them, and they've had all their CPS and background checks done, and they've been screened. And so we have the opportunity to call them and say, hey, would you be able to take this child? This is the situation. And we show up on their doorstep, sometimes just with the clothes that this child is wearing, if they have clothes on at that point. But so we're fortunate in that sense. We also have placement coordinators that are on call with us at night. And so if we can't find a placement through our VEFC list, we'll call them, and then they can get us either a foster home in the area or a therapeutic foster home in the area, because the therapeutic foster care agencies are also on call. So there's a few options that we have. I have never been in the situation where I haven't been able to find a placement for a child in the 10 years that I've been with the county. It might take a few calls, and a lot of families will say, look, I can probably keep the child overnight, but you need to get them at 8 in the morning. And we're happy with that if that's all we can get, as long as we can get this child to a safe place that night and then regroup in the morning if we have to. But we will typically find a placement for a child. I have heard of stories of long time ago of workers having to take the kids back to their office and stay with them there for the night if we haven't been able to find a home. But I've never encountered that in the years that I've been here, and I haven't heard of any stories recently of that. And I think it's because we have such a vast array of resources available to us in Fairfax County.
Are most of the foster families through an agency now? Because at one time it used to be, the county trained families.
We have
Let's go
county,
that way.
we have the county foster homes, and then we have therapeutic foster care agencies, which are private agencies, which are not with the county.
We have both.
Oh,
So we
okay,
both-
so the county is still doing
We still
their
have
own training. They haven't given that over to foster family agencies that
Not that I'm aware of.
It's just
get their own
they both exist.
foster families. Huh?
They both exist.
Fairfax County does their own recruitment and their own training of foster homes because we are liable for our children in those homes. The therapeutic foster care agencies do their own recruitment and their own screening process, and then we contract with those therapeutic foster care agencies if we need to, and we've screened them. We, utilize them for their services.
Are the therapeutic homes individual homes?
There's no group homes. We have residential facilities that are used not as often, but there's that term of a group home doesn't exist.
We have a few residential homes though that for kids, which are also known as the group homes. Therapeutic means that it's a higher level of care that's needed for the child. But we may place a child in a therapeutic foster care agency if we have no other available resources to us. Even if they didn't need that higher level of care. But typically, the therapeutic agencies are being utilized for our harder to place kids, whether it be like kids with spica casts, little kids that are in body casts from like here down. Those are a little bit more difficult and more challenging.
tubes.
Feeding tube kids, like my little girl that I removed with the feeding tube, she went to a therapeutic foster care agency.
Behavioral issues.
Autistic kids?
Yeah.
They'll go.
And so the Fairfax County trained volunteers
The VFC homes,
they're volunteer,
they're
but are there some that are paid?
regular foster homes,
Are paid.
are paid homes.
So you take your child there in the middle of the night, they're gonna get paid.
And if it's a regular foster home, yes.
Or therapeutic.
So you try to start with volunteers.
Absolutely.
Start with free and move up to
Right.
whatever.
But the volunteers are short term. They usually take our kids up to 2 weeks.
They usually get us through the 5-day, and then once we know what's happening at the 5-day or the 5-day, they'll get moved.
But they won't get paid for those 5 days, or they will?
They will not. Our VEFC homes are all volunteer families. They do not get paid.
We try to supply them with clothing, with food, diapers, grocery store gift certificates, Walmart gift certificates, Target. I mean, anything we can do to help. But you'd be surprised how many just out of their own pockets will provide for the kids.
And they also specify age groups, so we'll get one family that's 0 to 2, so we know they'll have like a crib and
Right.
diapers and baby clothing and baby bottles. So when we bring them, we know that they have those supplies typically because they're indicating that that's their age group. So they can indicate also and let us know.
And they go through just as screening process as the regular foster homes.
Any other questions?
How many cases do you all usually carry?
We typically carry between 5 to 7 cases a month, intake does. We max at 13 a month. Right now, March, April, and May are our busiest months, and we typically have higher caseloads right now. We'll slow down in the summer once school gets out. We get a lot of referrals from the schools and therapists, and a lot of that stops in the summer. But that's an average. Any other questions?
So if you get 13 a month, and then you just keep getting like,
It keeps going.
You have to really prioritize your workloads when you start getting numbers, because not all 13 or not all 7 are going to be an extremely high priority. You might have done your interviews and put in an intervention, and you're just going to go back and follow up and then close the case out. Then others, you might have court intervention, you might have a co-investigation with a police detective, so that's going to take up the majority of your time. So you just prioritize according to risk and safety of each family that's on your workload.